Welcome to Shuffle Source. I'm your host Brandon, and today we're back with another exciting Precon upgrade video. This time we will be upgrading the Witherbloom Pestilence Precon deck from Secrets of Strixhaven. Let's get into it. Really fast before discussing the commander we will be using, let's quickly go over the Precon upgrade format that we use here at Shuffle Source. The first item to note is that we will either use the primary or the backup commander. Next, we have a cap of around $100 or less that we use when choosing the upgrades. We will be adding 10 cards and removing 10 cards. Additionally, we add a few more upgrades that we call no budget options near the end of the video, and that's for people who maybe already have the cards or have a little bit extra in their budget for continued upgrades. And lastly, we do use market value pricing provided by TCG Player at the time of recording, which is displayed at the bottom of the screen when we discuss the cards. So the commander we will be discussing today is Dina Essence Brewer. For 1, a black and a green, we have a 2/3 legendary creature Dryad Druid that says whenever you sacrifice a creature, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. You can also pay 2, tap her, sacrifice another creature, you gain X life and put X +1/+1 counters on target creature you control, where X is the sacrificed creature's power. Dina is a sacrifice-focused commander that rewards us for sacrificing creatures by turning them into card advantage, life gain, and powering up other creatures. Dina's first ability says that whenever we sacrifice a creature, we get to draw a card. But that will only happen once each turn. That restriction is very important because it means this deck isn't about sacrificing a bunch of creatures all at once. Instead, we would really like to sacrifice creatures consistently across multiple turns so that we can keep drawing cards over time. Her second ability lets us pay 2 mana and tap her to sacrifice another creature. We get to gain life from that and put +1/+1 counters on a creature equal to that creature's power. This gives us a built-in sacrifice outlet that also scales our board and provides life gain, which opens the door for a lot of the life gain payoffs that we have in this deck and that we will be adding. So the game plan here is we want to use our creature tokens and our recurable creatures as fuel. We sacrifice them to draw cards and trigger our life gain and drain synergies that we have in this deck, and that card advantage helps us find the pieces that we need for the rest of the plan, whether that's finding bigger, more synergistic creatures, life gain payoffs, or ways to keep our engine going. So when it comes to upgrading this deck, our primary focus is going to be around adding more ways to benefit from our life gain and drain synergies, adding additional sacrifice outlets, and by optimizing our removal, ramp, and card draw package. Hey everyone, Shuffle Source is heading to MagicCon Vegas. To celebrate, we're hosting a giveaway. One lucky winner will receive a Secrets of Strixhaven Play Booster Box shipped directly to them. You don't have to be attending the convention to enter, we want everyone to join in on the fun. Just follow the link in the description to find out how to enter and to see the official rules. Good luck to everyone who enters. And now let's get back to the video. So here we have the first of our additions. We have Ashnod's Altar for 3 colorless. We have an artifact that says sacrifice a creature, add 2 colorless. So Ashnod's Altar is a solid addition because it gives us a free repeatable sacrifice outlet that also generates mana. Now we already have other sacrifice outlets in the deck, but adding one that also gives mana makes our turns more efficient and lets us do more in a single turn. The fact that it also gives us 2 colorless lines up perfectly with the cost of Dina's activated ability. So if we need the mana, we could sacrifice maybe one of our creature tokens, use the mana it produces, and then immediately use that mana to activate Dina's ability. And next up we have Cauldron of Essence for 1 a black and a green. We have an artifact that says whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. You can also pay 1 a black and a green. You can tap it, sacrifice a creature, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Activate only as a sorcery. So Cauldron of Essence is another great gain and drain piece, very similar to Blood Artist, except it's on an artifact. That's important because artifact removal is less common than creature removal, so it might stick around more. Every time one of our creatures dies, we gain life and drain each opponent, which means every sacrifice is now contributing directly to our win condition. On top of that, it also gives us recursion. By letting us bring back key creatures from the graveyard, we can keep our engine and game plan going over time. This is especially strong for bringing back big, impactful creatures that we sacrificed with Dina, or even ones that our opponents removed, so we can keep generating value from those creatures over and over again. And here's our next addition, Enduring Tenacity. For 2 colorless and 2 black, we have a 4/3 enchantment creature, Snake Glimmer, that says whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. When Enduring Tenacity dies, if it was a creature, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. It's an enchantment, so this deck has the ability to gain a lot of life, and Enduring Tenacity is an excellent addition to this deck because it directly turns our life gain into a win condition. Whenever we gain life, it causes an opponent to lose that much life, which means all of our sacrifice and life gain triggers start translating into real damage. And because some of our creatures can get very large, especially by putting +1/+1 counters on them, those sacrifices can result in huge bursts of life gain that in turn can deal significant damage all at once. On top of that, this card is very resilient. When it dies, it will come back as an enchantment, which means it's much harder to remove permanently. We always want to be able to try to have a card like this on the board if we can, so it having staying power is very relevant for us. And next we have Genova, Ancient Calamity. For 2 colorless, a black and a green, we have a 1/5 legendary creature alien that says at the beginning of combat on your turn, put a number of +1/+1 counters equal to Genova's power on up to one other target creature. That creature becomes a mutant in addition to its other types. Whenever a mutant you control dies during your turn, you draw cards equal to its power. So we like Genova in this deck because it gives us a repeatable way to scale our creatures every turn. At the beginning of combat on our turn, it will put +1/+1 counters equal to its power onto another creature. And obviously, if we're able to buff up Genova itself, the effect becomes even stronger, giving us a repeatable way to pump up a creature on each of our turns and then sacrifice it with Dina. So when this card is obviously paired with Dina, whenever we sacrifice a creature, we're going to gain a large amount of life, place a lot of +1/+1 counters, and draw a significant number of cards when that single creature dies. This card just pairs exceptionally well with Dina's game plan, and it can give us access to a lot of card draw. Next up, we have Professor Delian Fell. For 2 colorless, a black and a green, we have a legendary planeswalker Delian that has a starting loyalty of 5. It has a +2 ability, you gain 3 life. For 0, you draw a card and lose 1 life. For -3, destroy target creature. And for -6, its ultimate, you get an emblem with whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. So Professor Delian Fell just offers so much to this deck. You can definitely tell that it was created to support this precon. He gives us life gain, card draw, removal, and even a life gain based win condition all in one card. Every ability on this card is relevant, and he gives us a lot of flexibility depending on what we need in the moment. Certainly though, the real payoff has to be that ultimate. The emblem gives us another way to turn all of our life gain into damage, adding even more redundancy to our win conditions. And one of the things I really like about this card is that hitting its ultimate is actually quite achievable. You're only going to have to do the life gain ability one time to get up to 7 loyalty, and if Delian can make it across another turn rotation, you're going to be doing an ultimate on your turn, and he'll still be alive on the board with 1 loyalty remaining. And here we have Savra, Queen of the Golgari. For 2 colorless, a black and a green, we have a 2/2 legendary creature, Elf Shaman, that has whenever you sacrifice a black creature, you may pay 2 life. If you do, each other player sacrifices a creature, and it also has whenever you sacrifice a green creature, you gain 2 life. So Savra is another great addition to the deck because it rewards us directly for what we want to do, and that's sacrificing creatures. A lot of our creatures, even our creature tokens like Pests for example, are both black and green in color identity. That means when we sacrifice them, we can trigger both of Savra's abilities, which will gain us life while also forcing each opponent to sacrifice a creature. In a game of Commander having 3 opponents, this can easily act as a 3-for-1, making it a very powerful piece of removal. And here's our next addition, Soul Shatter. For 2 colorless and a black, we have an instant that says each opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker with the highest converted mana cost among creatures and planeswalkers they control. So Soul Shatter is just an excellent upgrade to our removal suite. It's a 3-for-1 in Commander, forcing each of our opponents to sacrifice their most impactful creature or planeswalker. What makes this especially strong is that it gets around things like indestructible and hexproof since it doesn't target. It forces our opponents to sacrifice instead. That makes this piece of removal so much more reliable than a lot of the removal that came in the deck to begin with. And next up we have Southwind Avatar. For 3 colorless and a black, we have a 3/4 creature snake spirit avatar that has death touch. Whenever another creature you control dies, you gain life equal to its toughness. Whenever you gain life, each opponent loses 1 life. So I like Southwind Avatar in this deck because it lets us get even more value out of every creature we sacrifice. With Dina, we're already gaining life equal to a creature's power, and this then adds life equal to the toughness on top of that. That means every sacrifice now gives us a much larger burst of life gain, especially with our bigger creatures. On top of that, it also drains each opponent whenever we gain life, so all of those instances of life gain this deck has turns immediately into extra life loss for our opponents. And when you pair up this card with cards like Enduring Tenacity, for example, those life swings get amplified and can really help us close out the game. And our next addition is Utopia Sprawl. For 1 green, we have an enchantment aura that says Enchant Forest. As Utopia Sprawl enters the battlefield, choose a color. Whenever Enchanted Forest is tapped for mana, its controller adds an additional 1 mana of the chosen color. So Utopia Sprawl is a great early game ramp piece for this deck. For just 1 mana, it lets us enchant a forest and allows us to generate an extra mana every time we tap it of the color we chose. This card can allow us to play Dina as early as turn 2 or deploy any of our other impactful 3-drops since we have a lot of them in this deck. On top of that, it being an enchantment is a nice bonus since they're generally harder to remove than creature ramp because most decks run less enchantment removal, so this tends to stick around longer. And here we've made it to the last of our additions. We have Veto, Thorn of the Dusk Rose. For 2 colors and a black, we have a 1/3 legendary creature Vampire Cleric. Whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. You can also pay 3 and 2 black. Creatures you control gain lifelink until end of turn. Veto is great in this deck because just like Enduring Tenacity, it turns our life gain into life loss for our opponents. Every time we're going to gain life, we drain an opponent for the same amount, which means all of our sacrifice and life gain triggers start pushing us closer to winning the game. On top of that, Veto has an activated ability that gives our entire board lifelink. That can turn a single combat step into a massive life swing. That means paired with its first ability, we can be pushing a lot of damage through, and it gives us another way to close out the game quickly. And while not part of our actual additions, I did want to add an honorable mention, and that is Jumbo Cactuar. For 5 colorless and 2 green, we have a 1/7 creature plant that has the ability 10,000 Needles. Whenever this creature attacks, it gets plus 9,999 plus 0 until end of turn. So Jumbo Cactuar is actually insane in this deck. It is expensive, and you do have to be able to attack with it without it getting removed, but if you can, it becomes a 10,000 power creature. I think you can see where I'm going with this. If we then sacrifice it with Dina, we're going to gain 10,000 life and put 10,000 +1/+1 counters on another creature. Again, with something like Veto or Enduring Tenacity on the battlefield, that can immediately take out an opponent in one shot. And if we have something like Defiling Daemogoth, which is a new card in this deck, you can just end the game on the spot. It definitely has a bit of a setup and it is quite telegraphed to our opponents, but the ceiling on this card is pretty absurd. Hey everyone, I wanted to take a moment to give a huge shout out to our partner, the Mighty Meeple. If you're in or visiting the Concord, North Carolina area, the Mighty Meeple is the local game store to check out. Their team is friendly, knowledgeable, and always ready to help you find exactly what you need. From magic and board games to minis and more, whatever your hobby, they've got you covered. And even if you're not local, no problem. You can shop for Magic singles and other TCGs at mightymeeple.com. Thank you. And now let's get back to the video. And we've now made it to the removals portion of the video, and we're going to kick things off with Bloodghast. For 2 black, we have a 2/1 creature Vampire Spirit that says this creature can't block. This creature has haste as long as an opponent has 10 or less life, and it also has landfall. Whenever a land you control enters, you may return this card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So I know Bloodghast looks like it should fit in this deck, but it ends up just being outclassed by a lot of the other recurable creatures in this deck. We already have several small recurable creatures that do a similar job, but more efficiently and more consistently. This card does have a few drawbacks. It can't block, the haste is rarely going to matter in Commander, and its recursion is tied to landfall, which is not really something we're focusing on with this deck. And here's our next removal, Casualties of War. For 2 colorless, 2 black, and 2 green, we have a sorcery that says choose 1 or more. Destroy target artifact, destroy target creature, destroy target enchantment, destroy target land, and destroy target planeswalker. So Casualty of War is just too expensive and too situational for what it offers. At 6 mana, we need to be getting a lot of value out of it, And to get that value, it depends heavily on having the right targets on the battlefield. In many games, you won't even be able to hit all of the modes, which makes it feel inefficient for its cost. Additionally, in this deck, we'd much rather be spending that mana on advancing our own game plan or using more efficient, reliable removal. Honestly, anytime this card is put into a precon, it is one of the first cards that I cut. Next up, we have Dina Soulsteeper. For 1 black and 1 green, we have a 1/3 legendary creature, Dryad Druid, that says whenever you gain life, each opponent loses 1 life. You can also pay 1, sacrifice another creature. Dina gets +X/+0 until end of turn, where X is the sacrificed creature's power. So at first glance, you might think Dina fits pretty well in this deck, but it's actually pretty inefficient compared to the other cards that we're adding in our additions. While it does give us a life gain drain effect, it only drains for 1 life at a time, which makes it less impactful than some of our other payoffs that we're adding. More importantly though, its sacrifice ability doesn't really generate real value for us. All it does in this deck is give Dina a temporary power boost. In this deck, when we sacrifice creatures, we want to gain life and get +1/+1 counters, not just some short-term combat trick. And next we have Final Act. For 4 colorless in 2 black, we have a sorcery that says choose 1 or more, destroy all creatures, destroy all planeswalkers, destroy all battles, exile all graveyards, and each opponent loses all counters. Again, similar to Casualties of War, Final Act is just too expensive and not as efficient as the other removal options we have for the deck. So for 6 mana, it does offer multiple modes of things you can destroy, but honestly, other than creatures and graveyards, it doesn't destroy anything else that we really care about, such as artifacts and enchantments, for example. And here we have Haunted Mire, which is a land swamp forest that you can tap for either black or a green, and this land enters tapped. So Haunted Mire always enters tapped and doesn't provide us any additional upside. Since this deck already has several lands that come into play tapped, we really want to be more selective about which ones we keep. The other tapped lands in this deck at least offer some extra value or utility, but this one only provides basic color fixing. And next on the chopping block, we have Mortality Spear. For 2 colorless, a black and a green, we have an instant that says this spell costs 2 less to cast if you've gained life this turn. Destroy target non-land permanent. So I do like that Mortality Spear is a flexible removal spell, but the issue is it's just not as efficient as some of the other removal that we have. While it can destroy almost any permanent, its cost is inconsistent. Sometimes it's 2 mana and sometimes it's 4. Now, even though we do gain life fairly often in this deck, we don't want our removal to depend on that condition. We'd rather have removal that is always reliable and consistently costed. And here's our next removal, Springbloom Druid. For 2 colorless and a green, we have a 1/1 creature elf druid. When this creature enters, you may sacrifice a land. If you do, search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. So Springbloom Druid is a bit out of place here. It doesn't really fit into our game plan very well. First off, it costs 3 mana, and we're prioritizing cheaper ramp so that we can get Dina or other engine pieces online as quickly as possible. It also asks us to sacrifice a land, which really isn't something that we're built to take advantage of since this isn't a landfall deck. Overall, we're just kicking them out for a much more efficient ramp option. Next up, we have Trudge Garden. For 2 colors and a green, we have an enchantment that says whenever you gain life, you may pay 2. If you do, create a 4/4 green fungus beast creature token with trample. So when I was looking at cuts for this deck, I do think that Trudge Garden was one of the harder cuts for me because I do like that it has a nice synergy with our life game plan. However, the issue comes down to its cost. Not only do we have to pay 3 mana and it immediately come into play doing nothing, we then have to pay an additional 2 mana every time we gain life to get that token. And in this deck, we'd much rather be using our mana for more impactful payoffs. I just think that you'll find that this card ends up being a bit too mana intensive than you want it to be, especially compared to a lot of the upgrades that we're adding that will provide more consistent value without that extra cost. And here we have Witch of the Moors. For 3 colorless and 2 black, we have a 4/4 creature human warlock that has Death Touch. At the beginning of your end step, if you've gained life this turn, each opponent sacrifices a creature of their choice and you return up to 1 target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So Witch of the Moors costs 5 mana, which really makes it a bit too slow for what we're trying to do here. While it does force our opponents to sacrifice creatures, and it can give us some recursion, we've added more efficient ways to do both of those things much earlier in the game. And here we have the last of our removals. We have Witherbloom Command for 1 black, 1 green. We have a sorcery that says choose 2. Target player mills 3 cards, then you return a land card from your graveyard to your hand. Destroy target non-creature, non-land permanent with mana value 2 or less. Target creature gets -3, -1 until end of turn. And lastly, target opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. So Witherbloom Command is a flexible card, but all of the individual effects just really aren't impactful enough for us to keep it at all. Each mode does something quite small, and none of them really advance our game plan all that much. On top of that, it being sorcery speed also really limits on the times we can use it, which even makes it even less appealing. This spell honestly ended up being one of the easier cuts.
A special thanks to all of our channel members. Your support truly means a lot and we greatly appreciate it. If you'd like to show your support and get access to some exclusive perks, consider becoming a channel member by clicking the join button below. You can also support the channel by liking, subscribing, and dropping a comment. Thank you, and now let's get back to the video.
We've now made it to the no budget options portion of the video, and we are going to kick things off here with the Meat Hook Massacre. For X and 2 black, we have a legendary enchantment. When the Meat Hook Massacre enters, each creature gets -X until end of turn. Whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life. And whenever a creature an opponent control dies, you gain 1 life. So the reason the Meat Hook Massacre is such a good add for this deck is because it gives us a scalable board wipe that also fits perfectly with our sacrifice and life gain strategy. When it enters, we can set X to clear the board of smaller creatures, or if we pay enough, we can even wipe everything if we need. However, what really makes this card shine has to be the ongoing value that it gives. Whenever one of our creatures dies, each opponent loses life, and whenever an opponent's creature dies, we gain a life. That means every sacrifice that we make or anytime a creature dies, we continue to fuel our life gain and drain synergies. And here is our next no budget option. We have the Ozolith. For 1 colorless, we have a legendary artifact that says, whenever a creature you control leaves the battlefield, if it had counters on it, put those counters on the Ozolith. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if the Ozolith has counters on it, you may move all counters from the Ozolith onto target creature. So the Ozolith pairs very well with Dina in this deck because as we sacrifice creatures that may have a lot of +1/+1 counters on them, those counters would normally be lost, but instead they get stored on the Ozolith. And then at the beginning of combat, we can move all of those counters onto another creature, letting us keep scaling our board even while we're sacrificing our creatures every turn. If we sacrifice a creature that already has counters on it, we get value twice. Dina uses the creature's total power, including those counters, to create new ones. The Ozolith will store the original counters it had for later, so we're not losing anything, we're actually multiplying our value. It also offers a lot of resilience. If Dina isn't on the battlefield, or if we get hit with a board wipe, for example, all of that progress won't be lost. It's instead saved and we can rebuild almost immediately on our next turn. And we've now made it to the last of our no budget options. We have Vampiric Tutor for 1 black. It is an instant that says search your library for a card, then shuffle and put that card on top. You lose 2 life. So Vampiric Tutor is great here because it gives us access to exactly what we need when we need it. For just 1 mana at instant speed, we can search our library for any card and put it on top. Whether that's a sacrifice outlet, a life gain payoff, or another key part of our engine, this helps us just find what we need. Also, hopefully since it was reprinted in Secrets of Strixhaven, it will also help reduce the price and make it more accessible to players. And there you have it. After upgrading this deck, we have a final upgrade cost of $48.81. This total does not include the honorable mention or no budget options that we covered. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to like and subscribe for more video. We're constantly creating more content and have a lot more Secrets of Strixhaven to cover. So let me know what you think about the Witherbloom Pestilence Precon. What other card should I consider adding? Let me know in the comments below. I'd really like to see what you came up with. And as always, until next time, thank you for watching.